Here's Rocco Passafumi to give his thoughts on the social media impact of the bullying.
Yes, hi. I think that it's important that I weigh in on this because being of somebody who's sort of more familiar with the social media aspect of the whole thing, you know, because we're young, like younger people have really embraced it particularly. The thing about social media in terms of how it affects people's behaviors is that, you know, when you have technology and it's, you know, and it's advanced and you have this instant gratification that comes with it, you get this sense of, you know, power that you get instantly. It's a lot more than, you know, before when, you know, you had to kind of hold everything in, you had time to think, you had time to process your emotions, and, you know, with something, there's a lot of wonderful things about technology, and there's also a lot of really bad things about technology too. So, you know, there's like a double-edged sword with the whole thing. I think a really good example to bring up particularly is they were touching on it this year. There's a program that's fairly well known, an adult cartoon called South Park, and they were touching on both the election and this kind of, you know, thing that people do with social media where people can anonymously make comments, and this adult was making all these comments, and basically he's making comments because you find out that he's like not in the happiest place, and he has to like hold in all of his anger all the time. So, you know, after, you know, his long day at work, he goes home, and then basically he, you know, gets a glass of wine and just starts trolling people. And in many ways, it really just brilliantly satirizes the kind of, you know, world we live in today with this, and you know, this idea of, you know, people, you know, they feel so miserable in their lives that they feel like the internet has become their weapon to fight back. You know, they feel like they can become like almost like a god on the internet, and then that can be very dangerous because, you know, you do have ramifications that come with it. You know, there's, you know, I mean, because, you know, you think you're so big and bad on the internet, but then you still have to face these people in your everyday lives. So it's one of those things where it's just, I mean, it can really create like a false sense of, you know, inflated self-esteem and power and all that. And I think that's what it's really particularly important in understanding why people do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have to comment, you know, since I am a mom and a woman, you know, I think this, like, letting loose of aggression in an anonymous way is really something that, like, and maybe this is my character only, but it's something that is so foreign, I think, to a lot of us older people maybe, or moms or women, or men too, a lot of men. But to just, I mean, I would never really, it doesn't strike me to, I was taught, I'm an older person, that, you know, especially if you, don't say something that you can't take back, but also, you know, the things that we're putting online or we're writing, or even like at work, people writing these, you know, edgy emails, they're really things that you really can't sort of take back. It's almost like showing your inner self, you know, your real inner self and your unedited self. And it's not really something that it's uncivil, you know, I've used that word before. It's got there's no control, like you were saying, somebody's drinking wine, or, you know, I've heard of people using the drug Ambien and then making these phone calls or eating during the night. That's a sleep aid. But certainly using alcohol or drugs and going online, you know, and then saying things that you would never probably say, they're permanent. And they're also impulsive, and there's no two-way interaction. You know, at least if you go to your friend's office, you could see their eyeballs. You know, I always say, you know, I want to see the person's eyes who I'm speaking with, and it slows you down. You know, and I think that's something that's really missing, is this, you know, bridling of our own aggression, and, you know, being concerned about other people's thoughts or welfare.
Yeah, I think a byproduct is this. I think that people have lost long-term friendships. I've heard relatives aren't talking to each other anymore. I had a situation the other day where a married couple, one was voting for Trump, one was voting for Hillary. They're at each other's throats right now. It's created a tremendous divide. And you know what? I have to say this. I think this was the election that there has, put it this way, there's never been an election in our country where you had two such polarizing figures that both had so much baggage. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I've heard so many people say, when I vote, I'm going to hold my nose, or I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils, because Trump had all his baggage of all the terrible things he said, but Hillary, you know, people said lock her up. She had all the emails and all the Clinton scandals, and you know, the one comment she made, which I thought really was devastating to her, when she called Trump supporters deplorables. I mean, that was horrible. So you know what? And they both said terrible things. I think there's never been an election before where the unfavorables were so high on both, and I just think that led to such animosity throughout the country. But I'd like to bring Zach in here, because I'd like to know the perspective of college students. What went on at a college campus during this? Because college kids are very high, they're very bright, but they're also very into social media. So they read a lot, they're very big on Twitter and Instagram. So Zach, what was the atmosphere like at Hofstra with you and some of your friends and kids that went to school? What was that like during the whole campaign?
And the kids vote. Did they vote?
Yeah, actually, there was a polling center. I go to Hofstra University. It's obviously a very liberal college. It's a liberal arts school. And there's a polling station actually right next to Hofstra. There's a little school where there was a polling station. So I saw a lot of kids in there. I actually got a chance to interview some people for one of my classes in there. And the demeanor during the day, before the polls were even in, seemed really low. No one was excited for what seemed like such a huge day. And watching the polls, I was actually in the Hofstra Journalism Chronicle room. So I was with a lot of people who were very educated on news, but mostly liberal people, considering it's a liberal arts college. And the demeanor in the room was just shot. It was all-time low. I actually saw one girl scream and have a crying fit overseeing the results of Florida. That was around 9:30 that I saw those, and it was just really sad to see. And that seemed like the turning point where everyone started to feel like, oh my God, like what is our country coming to? And the next day, not on my campus, but I've heard on other college campuses, there was all sorts of like things to help people deal with the results.
Grief counselors.
Yeah, grief counselors hired, safe spaces.
Special dog therapy dogs.
All sorts of therapy dogs and all sorts of stuff like that came in that colleges dropped tons of money on, which seems crazy to me that people need that at this point. It kind of shows you where our country's going. Yeah, considering if you're adults, you're in college, you should be able to deal with the results, especially of such a populace of people. And the fact that so many kids needed to actually use that outreach was it's interesting to see. I guess good considering that they instituted those programs, but also bad considering people needed those. So I guess, and also some kids on campus were elated. Trump supporters that I saw, absolutely chastising Clinton supporters. It seemed more of like a ha-ha, we beat you than
Any fistfights or anything get violent?
I didn't see any fistfights about that. Maybe that contributed to some fistfights that would have happened. But maybe that built animosity for people, but I don't think I saw any particular fights. But I do know multiple people who were in the city this past weekend, in Manhattan.
In Manhattan, it was surrounded.
Yeah, swarming, tons of people protesting. There's people all over the country protesting, mostly in California and New York, that are just outraged. And it's kind of funny, people saying, not my president, sort of mocking the people who said that about Obama, but now the tables are turned. It's really just, the whole situation is terrible. And I think that on a college campus, you can kind of see the entire dynamic of one side of people's thoughts all wrapped into one.
Absolutely. We're going to get to Rocco in a second, but